Welcome back. We're so excited for today. So we're going to be doing a lot of things today, obviously covering all the breakdowns of what's going on in the world, things that happen in fantasy. But one of the things we're going to ask for you, in addition to doing our quick hitters and deep dive questions, is let us know what happened for you over the course of the week with what local flavor told you. It's one of the things that we really like to do is kind of get our feedback from what helped and what didn't. And we want to know. So with that being said, Bob, my camera apparently hates me. But we got some questions in that are jumping in here as I try to figure out this little minor problem here that's annoying the hell out of me. But Recon and George, welcome to the table. First off of the bat.
Yeah, Joe, before we answer any questions, I just want to touch on something it's definitely interesting. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, what's become really apparent is this concept of, carrying just one quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I noticed last week is a couple of viewers were talking about holding on to Jane Daniels and Jordan Love at various points in time in the year.
Yeah.
Moving on, having Justin Fields and talking about which quarterback do I start. And I think we've come to a point in time in the year where there's a couple quarterbacks that are definitely worth owning and a couple of quarterbacks that are going to be matchup dependent and a couple of quarterbacks that are really just not worth the time or the effort in the team, right? And
sure.
one of the most surprising quarterbacks that I just want to mention, because the matchups have been pretty good for right now, right? Mm-hmm. Is Baker Mayfield. And this is a guy where we have a couple years back, we had him as dead in the water, right? And I think most people did have him dead in the water, especially coming from the Browns, but being the only quarterback from Cleveland that could get them to the playoffs in the most recent memory, right? So when I look at a guy like Baker, and I think it's going to be pretty apparent from now going forward, actually, is that Baker's a starter in a 12-team league. Baker might even be a starter in a 10-team league. And I'm looking at these matchups coming down the road because he just put up 28 points. On FanDuel DFS, he was the top scoring quarterback of the week, and he's had that designation, I believe, at least 2, maybe 3 times this year. So while, and that was going into a week, Joe, that he had a 1-star matchup. So nobody was really believing that Baker was the guy. But you turn it over, and to that end too, Caleb Williams has put out a couple good weeks against terrible teams, but Baker's doing them against pretty decent teams and some terrible teams down the line too. So I just want to point that out there. That's going forward. It feels like
we're going to be talking a lot about the guys who are not living up to it and are. And George is actually starting with one of the big ones here, which is Kyler Murray, man. George, we've been telling you a lot, get rid of DJ Moore, but Kyler Murray is returning to the midseason form of Kyler Murray of 2 years ago, when basically he'll be good the first drive. That's all pre-scripted and worked out for, when the coaches are basically able to micromanage the hell out of him in his opening script. And then that offense falls apart. It has been this way now 3 straight weeks. It is not uncommon for that to be the lifestyle of Kyler Murray. If he is playing against a defense that is doing man coverage, which will let him run around and go crazy, he will be great. But the book's out on this guy. He can't beat cover 2. And cover 2 has become the most common defense in the NFL right now. None of the receivers, as second Harrison went out, and even kind of a little bit with Harrison not going out, can beat man.
We'll get to that dark side.
With that being said, Murray's dead in the water, man. And quite frankly, Dak might be getting there too. So George, we feel you there.
And to that end, Joe, and for George here, I also had Gibbs in a lot of DFS lineups. So I paired Gibbs and Montgomery in a couple of them, and it just seemed that it was just Gibbs. It was just Monty's day. After signing that big contract, it was just his day. Those touchdowns will come, and with Brian Thomas Jr., we're going to have growing pains with Brian Thomas Jr. We're going to have growing pains with every rookie.
I'm letting him throw it with Thomas, though.
And I think that Brian Thomas Jr. and Barkley, especially with Barkley, it just felt like, even though that score looked close, that game was actually never close.
No.
And from strictly a standpoint of, will we be fine going forward? I think we will, but I think for you, George, we might want to consider moving on from Kyler. Kyler is definitely one of those quarterbacks that's capable of putting up 25 points a game just because he can do it on the ground. But the weapons are not healthy. The weapons aren't enough. The coaching's not enough. And he's at that point in time where we've had him in the potential top 5 finish over the course of the season. It's looking more and more like that's not going to happen. And especially when we look at the quarterbacks that we feel will probably be above him by season's end, you've got Lamar, you've got Jaden Daniels. I mean, it's on the verge that I might even rather start Justin Fields over Murray. And that feels weird to me to say that, because I also have Murray on my team. And in my 2-quarterback league that we're in, I have Murray and Dak, and I'm panicking. I am really panicking, George, with this Murray and Dak situation, where I wasn't panicking a couple weeks back, but now I am. So let's answer a couple of these questions. Dark Side Xenon, welcome. Recon, welcome. Andre. And if you just joined us and you have a question, our new system is that if you want us to just dive into it quickly, just give a yes or no answer, a couple word response, just type in QH before your question. If you want it to be a little bit of a deep dive, we'll give you that, but it might take a little bit of time for us to get there. So dropping Keon for Juju, I think, is a solid play. Should I drop JSN or Waddle for any of these running backs? I don't know if I drop JSN or Waddle for any of these running backs, but what I will say is that Mike McDaniel came out today and said that we don't really know when Tua is coming back. And they said that he wasn't super confident. He said he'll play at some point this season. And so it begs the question is, how much longer can we wait for Waddle? I think JSN will be fine, but it's more so how much more can we wait for Waddle? And Vidal had that wheel route in that game. It was a really interesting game because he was getting a decent amount of carries in that game. But J.K. Dobbins was definitely the superior back. And I would say that, you know, for him as a rookie to get 4 carries is pretty decent, right? I'm not willing to go out and want to get him right now. I would consider Benson with Connor having the ankle injury, but I don't think I'd drop either of those 2 right now, George. I don't think I'd drop either of those. And it is crazy, Andre, for how the season is flying so far. And with all these injuries coming around, it has been one of the weirdest seasons from a fantasy perspective, because injuries are a part of the game, but usually these injuries don't factor in big-time fantasy pieces. And it seems to be that most of these big-time fantasy pieces they're getting injured. Either the usage isn't there or it's overusage. It's definitely something that we're going to keep our eye on over the course of the season here. And Caleb, I want to get to that when Joe comes back. Recon, we're going to get to your deep dive in a moment. Dark Side, I absolutely believe Jordan Love is him. One of the guys that I liked coming into this season was Jordan Love, and I tried to get him into a lot of leagues that I was in. And for him, it's just, the injury was unfortunate, but these are the type of numbers that Jordan Love can put up on a week-to-week basis. Plus, he has those rushing numbers that will occasionally come into it. I'm definitely all in on Jordan Love. He's my starting quarterback in my 12-team home league, and I'm going to be throwing him in a lot more DFS lineups heading forward here. Xenon, let's get to your quick hit. Let's get to George's quick hit, and then Recon will get to your deep dive. Should I try and trade away Cook and AJ Brown for Barkley and CD in a no PPR league? I'm going to be 4-2. So Xenon, I'm going to quick hit this really quickly, and then we can deep dive it after we hit Recon's question here. I am standing pat on AJ Brown. I think AJ Brown has an elite target share on an offense that, for all intents and purposes, is going to be good moving forward. Jalen Hurts didn't have the best day that Jalen Hurts could have, but Jalen Hurts definitely got the ball to A.J. Brown, and that's not a concern for me. It was definitely a decent passing day for Jalen Hurts, 16 and 25. And, not we expect for Jalen Hurts to have a lot more numbers on the ground. But I think that I'm standing pat on A.J. Brown. Cook, I was a couple weeks back, I was definitely in on Cook, right? Cook had the profile on a team with a decently powered offense to move the ball. He was getting good looks, getting touchdowns, and looked pretty explosive. Now with the turf toe injury, that could definitely be a lingering concern. I would look to move on from Cook, but and this is just from this perspective, and we can deep dive this in a moment. I am not sure Cook will be enough to get you into Barkley, and Cook in a piece might not even be able to get you into Barkley, even with Barkley's down game. But we can definitely touch on that. And Xenon, quick hit here. Should I sell Swift if I can? If you can, it depends on the price. We'll deep dive that in a moment, but it depends on the price. I would keep Swift right now. They're using him really well. Caleb Williams, like Darkside shared, Caleb Williams looked great in this game. Whether that's because Jacksonville wasn't good, whether that's because he looked great, I think it was because he looked great. Swift is going to be fine. Swift is going to be fine moving forward here. George, hold on to Tank. Absolutely hold on to Tank. Whether that, I'm assuming this is Tank Bigsby and not Tank Dell. I'm definitely holding on to Tank Bigsby. Dearness Johnson and Tank Bigsby will probably be a focal point of the run game moving forward. I'm not sold that this, it wasn't the best game that Bigsby could throw out there, but also going into the season, we weren't expecting huge things from Bigsby, but we did get a couple good games so far. I'm willing to hold on Tank Bigsby right now. And anybody in the chat, if you want us to deep dive any of your questions, put DD in front. If you want a quick hit, we can touch on it real fast. We'll do QH. Recon, I see your DD up there. We'll come back to it. Don't worry about it. And on to this, before I get to your question here, Wesley, on to this point about the Bills can't throw the ball. The Bills are definitely throwing less. And that's for sure a concern if you're a Josh Allen owner. If you're a Josh Allen owner and you want to move forward from him, the time probably was a couple weeks ago when you could have probably traded him for Jane Daniels and maybe make a lateral move like that. But I think right now what we're looking for out of Cook is healthy. And if you can move out of Cook and you can get into a Barkley or you can move into a Gibbs or a Montgomery, I think that would be a smart decision right now. Joe, I'm just touching a couple quick hits.
Yeah, so Darks, I want to hit on that. Bob, is this a deep dive or a quick hit?
No, it's just that it's just a comment. It was built into the other comment.
My answer was here. I think it's a little bit of an overreaction. I don't think it's that the Bills can't throw the ball. I think that yes, running the ball is easier when you can throw it. But that being said, I think that's just an overreaction. Josh Allen is still one of the best quarterbacks in this league. It's not a situation where it's like in Kansas City where they're opting they don't have to throw it. It's more of a when the game calls for it, they can throw it. The exception of Baltimore 2 weeks ago. I get that last week didn't look awesome, but I fully suspect that we saw that little graphic on Sunday Night Football last night that the New York teams are like 3-30 at home in MetLife Stadium at night. I fully suspect that trend to continue tonight. You'll see the true game spread come across as the Bills as a 2-point favorite, and I see the Bills winning this again tonight, flat out. Rodgers not having the heart is going to be a big factor. So
Wesley, to this point here, I'm going to treat this like a quick hit with an extra little piece of kickback. I'd do this trade. Cup is going to get into that protocol very, very soon of practicing, and he should be good to go in a couple of weeks, if not sooner.
He potentially could be here this week. They open it up so he could practice this week.
And you're moving into London and Cup. Now, I'm not over the course of the season. I'm not a guy that is super high on London, but in terms of a deal like this, I think what you have to think about, Wesley, and we can deep dive this in a minute. My initial reaction is yes, do this. But I will say is that Godwin right now isn't slowing down. So if
No, he isn't. The Saints defense ain't slowing anyone down either, though.
So if it, and that's something to be considered. He's going. We said at the beginning of the year that you're probably going to get 6 to 7 great games out of Chris Godwin, and the rest were probably going to be so. And you've kind of hit the peak where Chris Godwin's value, like we said, after 2 weeks, it's never higher. So if you're trying to sell Godwin, it always seems to be that time to sell him. So we'll deep dive that a little bit more.
Long story short, absolutely, Wesley, I would do that. And guys, just as a reminder, put up as we saw from Gazi up there, put up DD or a quick hitter so we know if you're doing a deep dive or not. And the other thing we're asking, because it's Monday, let us know how our answers gave you and fared you over the course of the week. We always like to get that answer back from all you team players up there.
And Hunter, to this point here, Hunter, if this were last year, yeah, I would have been a bit concerned about this. But
I agree with Hunter. You should be scared.
I think he is going to put up 22. I think he's going to get some work on the ground this week. But I'm not as confident, Joe, and we'll talk Josh Allen another time, but I'm not as confident in Josh Allen moving forward as I want to be. I'm
not confident the Jets can hold him off the field long enough.
Right. I mean, he's definitely still has the potential to get 30, 40 points in a game, but I'm not as comfortable with that. If Cook for Brees trade goes through, do I win the trade? No PPR. Honestly, Xenon, that could go either way for me. I like the idea of Brees Hall right now.
Yeah.
More than I like how Brees Hall is playing right now. So
Brees is still a tier above Cook.
I agree with that.
But so that would be my starting point answer. But when we're talking about prognostication moving forward, I think I both of them are recognized and we want to run the ball more. Both of them being the Jets and the Bills. They want to run the ball more. The thing with Cook is there's obviously no Allen there to pull it away. There's just Josh Allen, the quarterback who will snipe his touchdowns.
Well, also the turf toe injury. That's a scary.
Yeah. So overall, I want to go with Brees. He's by far the better player. I think they're going to just lean on him as the season goes on, especially as they get desperate and might not make the playoffs. So I think that's there. Love for Lamar is great.
To this end, hold on. Before we go to Cook, a trade like this is one of those trades that I absolutely think is a fair deal right now.
It's fair, but I want to do it. I don't want to go to a much older running back as we're hitting. So we're at the spot in the year where the older running backs are going to start tearing down and breaking down. You saw it a little bit yesterday. Now, granted, the Saints defense did first, but Kamara started burning out in that second half. The older backs are getting in trouble. We already saw the one in Minnesota go down. So the point is that.
But I will say this, Joe.
Eckler is a full-time run. Like Eckler, we're not buying into. Like buying into the older ones, I'm very concerned with.
Joe, he's 26 years old. Josh Jacobs is not old. So when you just feel like he's been in the league for the longest time, but he's been in the league since 2019. So he joined the league young.
He joined the league when it's 20?
Right. So, you look at it and you say, all right, so he came in and he hasn't yet hit his touchdown kind of potential yet. He's on a high-powered team. And the only games where he did not get a decent look at things were the games where Malik Willis was in and where Jordan Love basically was coming back. Every single, Week two was a crazy.
I mean, if he's only 26, take back everything I said. He's not in that old category.
Week 2 was
what I said about old running backs is still true, though.
Week 2 was a crazy volume game under Willis, but they didn't really get into the red zone, do anything special, right? So he had 32 carries in that game. He's a type of running back that he does have a lot of volume on him. Like historically speaking, he has a lot of volume on him.
Yeah, and I remember all the conversation we had about his efficiency dropping in Oakland.
When it comes to that, I do want to invest on players on good teams. So going forward, I think a smart thing right now in the season, knowing we're coming out of week 6, some people are 4-2, 2-4, 1-5, 3-3. I think it's really important. Hey, how's it going? I think it's really important to really stick to your guns here and move on to players that are going to be in good situations moving forward. So I think that's the piece here. And I think that when I see a question like this from Austin in a quick hit situation, would I trade Zay for Mike Evans? I think if you would ask me a week ago, Joe, my initial lean would have been yes. But seeing the way that he's being used on this team, it's encouraging. It's definitely encouraging. And I think that both of these I want on my team. But I think I'd rather have Zay right now.
I'd rather have Zay as well. Trying to keep in the quick hitter dynamic here of just yes or no. I'd rather have Zay.
Yeah.
So you got a couple of deep dives here queued up. Let's dive. I have no idea what's going on with my camera.
I don't know. So Recon here. I have Josh Allen, Saquon, Chase Brown, Zay, Tyreek, Laporta, Christian Kirk, Keon, Braylon Allen, Tracy, Mostert, Wicks. Do I send Zay Flowers and Pickens for Cup? I know we talked about this last week, Recon, and one of the things that we were saying is that it's good to start building for the future of your team.
Mm-hmm.
Pickens right now, his value is not high. It's not high at all. And
it's not. You'd be better off moving Flowers.
After the game that Zay Flowers had, you might be moving into an overpay right now with Cup. Still not coming back from the injury, but I still do feel like where we said with Austin, we'd rather have Zay. In this situation, you're building for the future of your team. And I think that I would like to move Pickens, but I'm not sure about Zay right now. And Pickens and Kirk, because you need to upgrade your flex, or at least who else do you guys think I could get? I'm 3 and 3
so
in a full PPR.
Recon, it's going to start with here is who in the league needs to have a 2-for-1 done to them? Who needs 2 starters? That's the first question, because when you're giving Kirk and Pickens, they're not really going to be start of the line top tier guys. Pickens, you're selling on the hope that, hey, once the quarterback changes, he might actually be able to complete a pass downfield. I mean, I understand they scored 32, but they left another 18 on the table. So the bottom line is that you're gonna have to sell someone on the fact that, when Russell Wilson comes in, he's gonna be more accurate, and Pickens won't drop wide open touchdowns in the back of the end zone. Probably won't be different, but that's what you're gonna have to sell him on. So the reality is Pickens is probably, when it's all said and gonna be done, going to be way more overrated for his career than he ever actually produced. There's plenty of second-round receivers that end up being bust in the NFL. He's closer down that road than the J. Jeff road, for sure.
Joe,
so
before you continue,
I don't think you're getting a lot out of Pickens.
Before you
but you need to go for someone who's desperate for 2 receivers. That's your only real chance.
Before you continue on that, though, what I will say, and this is something that is really important, and one of the reasons why I'm not high on Pickens, but I do think that Pickens does have a decent amount of value, is that after the bye, we have a group of teams that have been susceptible to the pass. In Washington, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Philly, Baltimore. And that takes us to week 16. So if there is going to be a turnaround for George Pickens, it most likely will occur after the Steelers bye, because almost all Steelers turnaround stories happen after the bye. We just saw Najee come out, although that wasn't a bye week Najee coming out this past week. It's definitely one of those. It's definitely one of those games that he started to heat up.
And guys, by the way, I got to apologize on that. That's one of the ones I was wrong on. The Raiders defense, we had them as our last great streamer. Steelers offense showed up the first time in forever, which was crazy. But still, that Raiders defense was almost as bad as the Saints. So Rico,
to this end,
to get back to your question here, I don't think I even want to do Zay for Cup straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore is in that place, which feels like they do this every midseason, where they just feel that they're ahead and they can blow people out. By ahead, I mean they have their install in. It's a better install than what the rest of the league has. They know what they're doing. You don't even know how to cover Lamar, and the bottom line is it could take care of you. The concern for this, though.
What's the concern, Joe? Oh my God, his camera's out. But anyway,
is, and this might, Zay basically did nothing in the second half.
And that's
that's the again, concern Joe, for Zay.
That's not a concern for Zay for me, Joe. That is definitely not a concern for me because that for Zay, he had 88 yards in the first half, and he ended up with 132. But what needs to be said though is that in the second half of that game, Derrick Henry took over, and there's going to be times. There's going to be times where that's going to happen. And again, we want to tie ourselves to players on very good teams.
Yeah, that's true too.
Zay is on a very good team. I think that if I were to trade Zay Flowers, George Pickens, and Christian Kirk, or moving any of those guys right now, I'd be wanting to move, like I said, into players on good teams. I'd be wanting to move into Deebo Samuels. I'd be wanting to move into the Amon-Ra's. We talked about moving in or out of Deebo last week. Some people moved into him. You reaped the benefits of that. While Terry McLaurin could go either way for both of us, he's something to consider. The Stephon Diggses again are something to consider. These are players, and Jayden Reed again. I won't stress this enough, but Jayden Reed, even if it was a little bit dinged up last week, those are the guys that if I'm trading away Zay, I probably want to get back. Last week we were kind of on the fence of this, and I think Zay. I think the AFC North wide receivers can be very polarizing at times. Outside of Jamar Chase, in that when it comes to wintertime, their teams tend to run the ball a decent amount. But let's keep thinking about this because Recon, where I'm at is I'd want to move. If I'm moving Zay again, I'm probably moving him. I want to move him into a Jayden Reed, so I'm going to do all I can to try to figure out how to get Jayden Reed on my team. I would think about moving him into like an Amon-Ra or a Deebo Samuel kind of combination somewhere in there. Even looking at Devonta Smith to a degree as well. I think those are the guys that I would want to target right now. I would want to still target Kupp. Don't get me wrong. I do still want to target Kupp. But to that end, I think that targeting Kupp with Flowers would be an overpay right now based upon his performance because he's still, he has the potential to continue to do that for a decent amount of games this year. You got Tampa coming up. That could be that game. He could destroy them completely. Cleveland coming up. Week 9's probably going to be a tough one against Denver, and then Cincinnati. And those are the next 4 weeks for him. So I'm really a hold on Zay right now, unless I'm trading him away for something absolutely elite level talent. And Kupp coming back from the injury could absolutely be that. But right now, I think this is a little bit too much.
You might even be able to get it for Pickens of Kirk depending on how desperate he is. That's the other part of it.
And to that end, Recon, when I look at the rest of your team and I see like what else can we do, I think that Tracy right now is a nice spot start fill-in and just running into Tampa this week. And I think that's going to be something for people that play Tampa on a regular basis. Godwin's, the Evans. It was a game that got out of hand in the second half. It just got out of hand. And so all of the players on Tampa basically reap the benefits of that. So we can definitely keep thinking about that for sure with you. So let's jump into a couple quick hits that we have coming down the pipeline, and then we'll return to those deep dives.
If it was only that simple, Dark Side. If it was only that simple. He doesn't have enough power.
Well, all you have to do is apologize.
That ain't happening. I don't apologize for when I'm right.
Let's get into a couple of these quick hits here. Am I
not
worried
at all
about Derrick Henry's health? No, I'm not. Derrick Henry is one of those players that he has the skill set. He has the durability to continue to do this. You might start to see maybe by week 10 or 11, maybe his age starts showing a little bit. But I do think that looking at it and seeing that he has a week 14 bye, I think that if you are solidly, if you're knowing if you
you
have
are really
Henry,
breaking the quick hitting rules right now.
if you have Henry, you're in it. You're in for a good time. That's all I'm going to say about that.
All right, so I'm
Trade,
treating this one as a quick hit hill. Devontae Smith for Swift, no.
you
I
definitely
see
do
where you're
have
stacked at
problems.
receiver. My answer would be trade Wilson for a better haul. You'll be at a better spot for it, both in the short run and the long run.
I agree with that. I agree with that, Armando. I would move Wilson for something a little bit better, but I do like Swift. Should I hold on to Hill or trade him, Xenon? Xenon, if you want us to deep dive this, just put a DD in the chat. But for right now, I'm going to quick hit it. Should I hold on to Hill? I think I'm still a hold on Hill.
Me too.
I think I'm still a hold. And if I should trade him, should it be for Brees or Bijan? If I were to trade Tyreek, I would trade him for Bijan.
Yep.
If I were to trade Tyreek, I would trade him for Bijan. Chris, I'm 10-man PPR, half point PPR. I'm stacked at running back. I need a second strong wide receiver one. If I were using Kyron as the trade piece, who would I target? My other running backs are Brees, Jacobs, Mostert, Ramondre, Tracy, and CMC. I'm selling high on Zay. Any chance I get Lamar? Has never had a top 25 wide receiver. Yeah, well, that's fair, Chris. That's absolutely fair when it comes to Zay. Lamar has never done that, and it's definitely something to
Also, never
monitor.
had
But
anyone
Zay's
talented
really
enough who could do it. I mean,
Zay's
the
really
one position they have neglected more than anything else in Baltimore has been their receiver. That's a fact. The only one who could have would have been Hollywood. He was on pace for it and he got hurt, and then he left. So that's basically it. So long story short, if you're who can you get for Kareem is your question here. You should be able to get AJ Brown. I think that's a nice, good spot. Obviously, we love Metcalf. That would be the two areas I want to look at.
Yeah, and for me, Chris, and we can deep dive this a little bit more at another time. But I think right now, if I were moving Kyron, I'd be wanting to build something to move into a Diggs and a piece, or a Mike Evans and a piece, or DK Metcalf and maybe something else. I think that right now, Kyron's value is probably in that Deebo Samuel or higher wide receiver range category. So I think you can move Kyron for a decent haul, depending on who you want to go get. So, Chris, down in the chat, if you tell us who you're looking to go get, we can help you out there. Dark side, quick hit here. I think it is worth it to pick up.
Absolutely, Dark side.
And to what you mentioned here, Chris, it could be something to watch out for with the Packers wide receiver room. Just touching on this outside of quick hits or deep dive here, the Packers wide receiver room is in a unique situation where all of their performers are actually really good. They either you have Dontavian Wicks, who might not be the most, he might drop passes, he might not be like the best route runner, but he's still pretty decent. Romeo Doubs is good. Jayden Reed is fantastic, and Christian Watson is still one of the deep ball threats in the league. When it comes to a guy like Bo Melton, I definitely think that Romeo Doubs is way ahead of him, Chris. But if Doubs is still on your waiver wire for some reason, he is totally worth a pickup, especially when they get towards the red zone. It looks really good for Doubs. And Austin,
Doubs is probably the second best receiver on that team.
To this question here, I think that the Kyron and AJ Brown side is the side I would rather be on.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to trade away Derrick Henry, but if I were trading away Derrick Henry and got that type of return back, that would be what exactly I would want. Would you trade Kareem Hunt for Monty or DK?
Yes, either one.
I would trade him for either one. Depends on what you need. If you need a wide receiver, go for DK. If you need a running back, better than Hunt, go after Monty. I think Monty is solid.
All right, Bob. I think it's time to jump back into our latest the deep dive here. We have Burrow. It's getting sent on the trade block, and everyone is denying my offers. how do we go about quarterback trades? I feel they're hard to trade. They are hard to trade. And when you're in a one quarterback league, they're hard to trade away for a couple of reasons. A lot of the name brand guys kind of suck. We're talking about Dak being horrible this year. Mahomes is not giving what you want. Even those who paid up to get Allen aren't really feeling it. So you look at it and say, it's kind of an asset that I can stream and get whoever, because what difference does it make? And there's a lot of degree with that with quarterbacks overall. It's just not a position that, even though they score the most, that there's a ton of variance between number 1 and number 12. Once you hit and quite frankly, even 18, that gap between 5 or so and 18 is so irrelevant. Why should I trade a piece if I can just stream someone who's going to be just as good in terms of points that I'm going to get? So that's the answer that I have about why it's hard.
Yeah.
But they tend to be decent throw-ins when someone's on a bye. You just got to do it early enough in the week and talk to the guy before he does his waiver pick selections. I mean, that's basically how you got to go about it, and do a 2-for-1 with them.
One of the things that we touched on at the top of the hours is when you have guys like Baker Mayfield coming out of the woodwork again for the second consecutive year, but nobody really trusting them, you have this dichotomy, I guess, where you look into it and you say, it's not worth carrying two quarterbacks on the roster, Gozy. And unfortunately for those people that might have a Jordan Love and a Justin Fields, you're looking at the bye week situations and you're asking yourself, okay, well, what do I do? And so coming down here, you have Jane Daniels. Washington is sitting down here at a week 14 bye. So you're riding him until week 14. When it comes to Joe Burrow, they also have a week 12 bye. So like what Joe was saying is, what I would think about doing is I would add Burrow and something else, right? Something else to the guy who owns Kyler Murray. Because as we shared earlier in the episode, Kyler Murray is struggling right now outside of that first drive, and it's very apparent on film. It's very apparent when you watch the game live. When you really look at it, there are people in your league that probably had rostered Kyler Murray and maybe are pivoting towards Justin Fields. You're looking at the Dak Prescott owner as well. Dak was going to be an every week starter. You no longer have the chance to look at the guy who had Caleb Williams. Sam Darnold continues to be an every week starter. I might want to talk to the Patrick Mahomes owner to see if I could get something done there. But looking at the top quarterbacks in the league, you're seeing, if I read these top 10 names, you're seeing a lot of quarterbacks that weren't drafted high. So you see Lamar, Baker, Jaden, Joe, or Burrow, Fields, Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, Kyler, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams. And, I'm looking at it and I just say to myself, Jordan Love is moving up. Jalen Hurts will be moving up. Josh Allen will most likely be moving up. Patrick Mahomes will kind of normalize into that 15 to 20 point range as well. So I'm targeting those owners, and I'm seeing what Burrow, and I'm trying to also upgrade them at another position. And this is why it's so difficult, is because when you're in that one quarterback league, people understand that, and people would rather not trade extra assets for a quarterback, no matter what quarterback that is. And usually it just moves from a quarterback into a quarterback, like we had a couple of weeks ago, where people were moving Jaden Daniels into Josh Allen or Josh Allen into Jaden Daniels. And where I see this at, Gozy, and anybody in the chat can help out as well, is that when I see this and I say, okay, what else can I do? Well, it's probably going to be Burrow and a running back 2 to get you into an RB to an RB2 as well. Burrow is kind of one of those pieces, and any quarterback really. Just as an example, I tried this a couple weeks ago with Fields and Love. I have Love. I tried to move Fields and Mike Evans and move into something pretty decent, and nobody wanted to take it because they'd rather take the risk of the waiver wire quarterback. While Bo Nix hasn't been fantastic, to say the least, he still put up in the last 2 games 23 points and 21 points. And you look at it and you say, okay, well, Joe Burrow in the last couple of weeks put up 19, 34, 17, 25. That's the reason. When you can still go out there, and while Joe Burrow is more name brand, while I'd rather have Joe Burrow because he has the potential to be really elite, I can just go out there and get Bo Nix for a week, hit and hope, and then move on to my other starting quarterback. So, Gozy, what I would try to do is definitely go after the Kyler owner. Definitely see, if somebody's starting Geno Smith and seeing if they don't trust him for the long term. But unfortunately, I think right now he's just going to burn a hole in your roster because people know that you're kind of suffering with him. And I think that's unfortunately what it is right now in terms of quarterback trades. And anybody in the chat, if you've successfully done a quarterback trade, let us know if it hasn't been like the Jane Daniels into Josh Allen or Josh Allen into Jane Daniels there. Let's get into a couple more quick hits as well. Xenon, I got Kelsey as the should I trade Kittle? And if so, who? So I like Kelsey a lot. And I do also think that Kittle has a good chance to finish in the top 6 of tight ends as the year goes on, maybe even top 4. I think earlier in the offseason, we were looking up some stats from previous seasons. And if you look back at the last 6 years, I believe George Kittle never has finished outside the top 4 in terms of fantasy production when he's been fully healthy. He might have missed a couple games here and there, but that is always the case with Kittle. If I'm moving Kelsey or if I'm moving Kittle, I think a good return for Kittle would be in the vein of a running back 2 or maybe a wide receiver 2. The tight end position has definitely been one of those positions that has been really loosey-goosey this year. People underperforming, some low-end tight ends overperforming. So a really good tight end is really worth it in the long haul. I think that if you're floating Kittle, you can float Kittle for a running back 2 or a wide receiver 2. And if you want to deep dive that, we can talk a little bit more. Should I trade Swift for Brian Robinson? I wouldn't do this. I think that both of them have a really good amount of value. And, just talking about Chicago Bears for a moment, Joe, they have seemed both of these teams have a decent amount of balance in them as it goes for rushing and receiving over the course of the last couple of weeks. So this is kind of pick your poison. Which one do you rather like? I like Swift, so I think
I like Brian Robinson all day.
I think I would keep Swift. So he just offered Bijan for Devonta Smith. Interesting. You take that all day. I mean, if you can get Bijan,
you take Bijan in that scenario.
Or Devonta Smith, it's any day. I don't see why, Armando. That's crazy to me that somebody would straight give you Devonta or straight give you Bijan into Devonta Smith. But this is where we're at right now, right? This is where we're at right now, where people who are struggling at wide receiver want to go after like super high name brand names like Devonta Smith, but they're forgetting there's still value in Terry McLaurin. There's still value in Diggs.
Sure is.
There's a lot of value right now in Debo. And while Wandale didn't put up a great game, while Cortland Sutton is still on a terrible team, there are going to be games where these players are going to perform. And Devonta Smith is definitely going to have it, but you cannot trade Bijan straight up for Devonta Smith. In my mind, that is nuts. So let's get to a couple more of the deep dives coming down the wire here. Joe, let's get to Mick. So 12-team PPR, second most points, 3-3, pending Brees -5. Love, Hall, Irving, Allen, Achane, Sermon. Yeah, you got to drop Sermon. Dell, JMO, Rome, Adams, Tolbert, Slayton, Neighbors. Any advice? Plenty of my low ends did pretty well. They absolutely did. And that was one of the things going into this season or going into this week, Mick, that especially in the wide receiver category, there are a lot of wide receivers that are appearing in, the top 10s in a given week, the top 20s in a given week that maybe aren't as consistent, who don't consistently appear in them. And I think that when when I look at
Mhm.
this on a weekly basis, you have a lot of difficult decisions to make, but you do have talent on your team. When Neighbors comes back, Slayton will not be worth anything. So just kind of chalk that
That's
up,
true.
that Slayton will not have as much value to you when he comes back. So that piece needs to be considered. But as I look at it, Joe,
Mhm.
the top, let's just go through the top 10 fantasy performers this week in terms of PPR. PPR. So we got Chris Godwin, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, Zay, Gabe Davis, Demario Douglas, Keenan Allen, Debo, Dobbs, and Deontay. I go back to week 5. Let's see how many of those names repeat.
Well,
Jamar,
you're
Drake,
to your point, Bob. You're gonna see some
Darnell.
turnover.
Yeah, you're seeing turnover. You're seeing weekly turnover in the wide receiver category. And I think one of the names that was really
So to
consistently in
answer your
there was
question here,
Neighbors,
Mick,
right?
we've kind of brought this up a couple of times. First of all, we love
Mhm.
that you're such a high scoring team. That's always great. But Adams is the one that like I said, I think that you can get the most for him.
Mhm.
The more that these trade rumors are going to heat up, because again, every week that passes, more suitors become viable as Adams' contracts diminishes. So I think Adams is your best bet to move right now. And that's how I would want to look at it moving forward. Having the Cowboys receivers with Tolbert, he should have been a blessing. He should have gone off this week, and he didn't. You
Mhm.
can't get rid of him. So you're in a spot here where maybe instead of dropping Sermon, you just basically pair him with Adams, do a 2-for-1 on a high end player that you sell him as like, hey, he's the ultimate insurance hit in case JT goes down again. We just saw how good he produced. Last week he gave you double digits points. That's how I would go about in selling the trade if I were you. But
Mhm.
for me, Adams is the piece I'm going to move. Dunze, I feel like we've talked about this every week, move a Dunze, but you don't want to do that clearly. So Adams would be the one that I would move. And who do I think you should really get for him? You know, what I would want to get from him is a Debo. Because I don't think you're going to be
Mhm.
able to get into the stratosphere, but I think you should be able to get into Debo, maybe even AJ Brown. That would be the
Mhm.
type of neighborhood I would want to be shopping in.
Yeah, and to that end, Mick, one of the things that I'm a Sermon owner as well, and as Joe said in week 5, Sermon didn't look good. And
Mm-mm.
Sermon was the natural next up, but Goodson looked better. So if Taylor can't come back this week, um, I think that Goodson's going to get a little bit more reps. So Sermon really doesn't have a lot of value right now, and I think for the most part he is worth dropping. But before I would drop him, I would try to pair him with Adams. And a natural movement, I think, for your team would be to move into Terry McLaurin, Debo, Diggs. Those names always kind of appear because they're flying a little bit more under the radar. And you already have Love, so I would attempt to try to move into Jayden Reed. I don't know if you have the capital right now to move into Jayden Reed unless you were to move, say, Devontae Adams and Rome, or Devontae Adams and uh, uh, maybe Slayton, something
Well,
like that. But that's to that end. That's where I would be at in with your team. Though that's the type of player capital that I would be using, and those are the types of players that I would move into. You,
yeah, so I mean, I just gotta make sure he's healthy. I didn't see any designation coming off of him, but I do remember him taking a shot during that game.
oh, Reed, yeah, Reed took a shot, came out of that game, and then I believe at one point in time went back into it. It says that he's good.
All right, so they did go back.
Yeah,
Like I
and
said, it got
again,
to the point when
he only had 28 yards in that game, but there are going to be better. There are going to be better games ahead for Jayden Reed. I think that that's absolutely 1000% certain.
The other
Teams
thing that
can
happened in
shut
that
things
game was
off.
Arizona's defense isn't good, and Kyler Murray stopped putting pressure on Green Bay's offense.
That's
So
true.
LaFleur's not a stupid coach. He had a 2-score lead and just started walking it back,
I'll
which
tell
there's
you though,
nothing wrong with.
watching watching the watching the Chargers Denver game, Denver's defense is so extremely aggressive. If Patrick Surtain can't go for whatever reason, I don't know how they're going to continue to be aggressive, because that was Justin Herbert's best passing day this year, and they thankfully they play New Orleans this upcoming week and Carolina the next week. So
Hey, the
Patrick
rattling
Surtain's
gun is going to go off, my man.
not going to be as useful. I love the name the Rattling Gun.
I can't stop doing it. Hey, since we only got one more DD on the thing here, before we dive into Ahmad, I do want to take a little side story talking about running backs that came up and produced. That was like, hey, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
We were right in saying you should have picked up Bigsby. Bigsby gave you 18 and a half. Out of a back, that is a great number. But first off, New Orleans defense cannot stop the run to save their life. There were massive holes, regardless of who had that ball. But Bob, what do you make of
You mean Bucky?
Yeah, Bucky did great. Bucky gave you 18 and a half in a PPR.
Yeah.
But he scored the second most points and got half of all the running backs on his team. You look at the PPR points overall, the top two are both Bucks. So that's something to recognize up front for what happened there. But what do we make of this? I mean, Bucky still produced, but it looks like he got jumped in terms of running the ball efficiently, getting the usage when it mattered. And how do you feel about Bucky seeing this new thing? And obviously, I think it's White has got thrown out of the window.
Yeah, I think I think that when you look at this, if you're a Tampa fan, it feels like potentially a three-headed monster is brewing, but I think that that's a red herring. I know that the coaching staff really seems to like Rashad White. So when he's healthy, he will probably have his fair share of opportunities and looks. But I don't think he has that long of a leash. So when it comes to who should we look at moving forward, I do question the direction with this team in terms of the usage of Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving, because it's not like the game was out of control by the time Sean Tucker starts getting looks. It wasn't. They had just come back into the game, so it wasn't like they were trying to save Bucky for any one reason or another. And I believe that both of them finished for 14 carries. If I'm going to look that up really quickly. Yeah, they both finished for 14 carries. They both had above a 5 average, and they both got over their longest run was over 30 yards. So moving forward, and I think the thing with Sean Tucker is he also got some work in the passing game and broke off a big one in the passing game. I think that Bucky will be fine when it comes to running backs, but Sean Tucker is one of those backs that is going to need to be monitored moving forward. He's probably going to be the biggest waiver wire claim this week, and the talk is that is he more than a Jawan Jennings 1 week wonder? Is he more than a Dontavian Wicks' 1 week wonder kind of performance? And it seems like maybe yes. So I'm definitely still on the Bucky Irving bus. So for anybody looking for a running back, I'm definitely still on the Bucky bus, but it doesn't hurt to go out there, especially if you have two quarterbacks and you can move one of those quarterbacks, or if you were carrying an extra tight end, or you were carrying Dontavian Wicks, or you're moving, or, carrying a wide receiver that you weren't really starting, it would be advisable to go after Sean Tucker. We talked about this a couple weeks back, is that every single week this year, there has been an overwhelming waiver priority claim list. For those people that went after and got Juju last week, you're not fighting for Juju this week. So you're fighting for a guy.
I want to say this about
Tucker.
Watching the tape, though, the difference between Tucker and Surtain, like after Surtain put up his stuff, I basically said, hey, this is not going to last in the long run. He's not a good back. Tucker looked like a good back, like he belonged. That's why it's concerning. That what I
And that
guess
was
what I'm
what
trying
the
to say is
tape
my real
says.
question here is I'm almost 100% confident that Shaun White should not be a starter in the NFL for any of the 32, including Tampa.
Mhm,
I'm not totally sure because I know how much higher Bucky is than White. I'm not
mhm.
totally sure though. Bucky is ahead of that production from Turner. To me the real question is how long does it take for the undrafted rookie to get the confidence? He's dressed in every game, I'm pretty sure, because of his special team prowess. But
Mhm.
when we look at this and go, hey, he might have jumped Bucky as well. I'm not sure on that. I'm not
I
confident
don't
it's
think
going to keep
so.
happening. I want to keep owning and playing Bucky just for his role, even
Right.
as the primary back. But like I said, Tucker is definitely a guy I want to pick up here. But if you want to jump into some quick hits before we
Yeah,
get into
let's
a
jump
Mars
into
deep
some
dive,
quick
we
hits
certainly can
here.
do that.
So, Xenon, you have Cup, Hill, Jay Jettis, AJ Amon. That's an elite team. That's a crazy elite team. There's no
Yes,
PPR
it
and
is.
got them all from buy lows. And that's one of the smartest decisions that I think that I've seen in a long time. Because even outside of PPR, these guys are potential game winning, game breaking type of players. So let's
The
get into a
problem is
couple
you have
more quick
5 of
hits
them,
here.
which is amazing.
Would you trade Amon-Ra and Tracy for Jefferson? I'm now 2-4 and need to win now. Also,
Jefferson is a win now candidate. It's hard to fight that.
yeah, Jefferson is definitely a win now candidate, but so is Amon-Ra. And Amon-Ra and Jefferson both had their buys.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy for right now. Let me check. Joe, do you happen to know off chance when the Giants buy is? I just went off my screen. Giants buy isn't until week 11. I I think I would hold. I know you're 2-4 right now, and I know that we were expecting a way better game out of Amon-Ra this past week, but it's one of those games where they just looked so.
Cowboys can't stop the run either.
The
The
Cowboys
Saints and the
can't stop the
Cowboys
run, and
cannot
that's
stop the run.
really apparent. And what we've seen 2 weeks in a row, a decently average to lower passing volume for Jared Goff, but extremely efficient. And Amon-Ra only got 4 receptions in that in the matchup, but he did get the touchdown. I think I'm holding on. I think I'm in a holding pattern. I actually am buying Amon-Ra right now. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
really scared about Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams is going to get his role is different. But I think right now Tracy is the candidate for you, George, that if Singletary doesn't come back, or if Singletary does come back and is healthy, I think that Tracy, what we saw this past week, will carve out something for this team. He's a different kind of runner, different kind of playmaker than Singletary. And this game against the Bengals was slated to be a really high scoring game, and it wasn't. And you saw that he got 17 carries.
Well,
He was involved in the receiving game. I think I'm keeping Tracy, but if you
I
are
think he's the only person the
scared,
Giants trusted. Like when you
I
watch that game last night, it's like, why the hell are you giving the ball to Wandale? Like, why do you
yeah,
keep giving it to Tracy? I was very frustrated from a
I
Wandale
think if
owner's
you are
perspective.
scared, I think it's worth it to consider to trade, and I would trade into Jefferson if that were the case. And we can deep dive that a little bit more later. Um, Also, should I try and trade Kyler, Devontae, and maybe Christian Kirk for Jordan Love? I would absolutely want to trade him for Jordan Love, but as Xenon says here, I don't want to move
Yeah, I
into
don't want
DJ
DJ.
Moore. So if I were you, George, I definitely would move out of Kyler, Devontae, and Christian Kirk into Jordan Love. I would just ask for a different piece back that's not DJ Moore. And you can tell us what the other team looks like, so we can maybe get some things together here. Because I'm still trying to think of this one for Mick as we go through these quick hits. I'm really trying to think of this one for Mick. Armando, I'm taking that Bijan trade. Should I also do Deontay Johnson for Swift? I would. I would,
Yeah,
Armando.
getting rid of Deontay Johnson's not a problem. That's an upgrade. There's no long-term skin off your back for that. Swift might actually be able to carry you something as they prove Kyler Williams can't throw the ball there, dark side. All right, Jesse. Welcome back, Jesse. Traded Dak and A-Chain for Allen. Dak is a disaster. You need to start a quarterback. So I'm not necessarily afraid of doing that. I see that that you got a thumbs down there. I actually like this one. I I get that getting rid of A-Chain is concerning, but Dak is going nowhere, and Josh Allen, when he's on, he's on. So I would go there. Dallas is a mess. They're going to their bye. I get it. It can be seen as a little bit of a scare move, but you need to win now. So Josh Allen can still win you a championship. So that's my answer there.
I'm kind of I'm not fully a thumbs down like Chris there, but I do think that I might have moved into a different quarterback. But I think that Allen, Joe, like you said, and like we were talking about earlier, he definitely has the upswing to get 30 points a game because he is Josh Allen. But we have to caution, the dynamic of this team changes seemingly on a week-to-week basis. And that's
Jesse's team does. He's got 5 trades he just hit us here.
That
so here's the next one he did. He traded Ayuk and JMO for Lamb. That looks like an oversale at this point, but CeeDee Lamb still has the potential because he's the only person on that team that when they come out of the bye, that he could have a week where he gets 20 targets, which I would have put past them with that coaching staff always being on the hot seat. You give Jerry Jones a week to think about it. I bet CeeDee Lamb gets a lot of balls coming out of this bye season, and he'll be good. So HD, we're gonna hit up all your quick
I'm
hits.
Okay with that. I'm okay with that trade too. I think that both Ayuk and JMO could turn their low volume into really big numbers, but it really is dependent upon who they play on a given week. So that's something to be considered. JMO is an all or nothing kind of player, it feels like. So
and then here's Jesse's last of his trifecta. He traded Allen from the Rams for Marvin Harrison Jr. I love that.
So you traded
backup running back for a potential stud receiver. That's a no doubt.
And even with the injuries, Jesse, with Marvin Harrison dealing with the concussion, and we said going into this week, Marvin Harrison was not on my top of my board to play this week because of Kyler Murray. I think that using a running back that you picked up on the waiver wires, who is good and getting a lot of work, I think this is a smart trade for you in considering that you're trying to try a lot of different things. I do like MHJ's long-term potential, but right now it's kind of a struggle to own him.
All right, guys, and just to let you know, reading down the comments here, I see that we have 4 deep dive remaining. We have Amaz, Joshua gave me 2, and Xenon gave me 1. So if I'm missing one of yours in the box, make sure you tell me there's a deep dive of yours that we missed. The rest of these we're all seeing as quick hitters. So let's hit the quick hitters and we'll get into a mod, Bob.
Hold on. Before we get there, Joe, I agree with, and this is where that thumbs down from Chris came into, is that the streaming quarterbacks this year, and this is how we began at the top of the hour, was that at the top of the first hour here, was that the streaming quarterbacks, Bo Nix is providing you, although it's a scary 23 points on a given week, there is the chance that the waiver wire quarterback, and to move out of Achane right now, not knowing when Tua is going to come back, that's kind of the piece here that I do agree. I do agree with Chris on this aspect of it, because we did talk about this earlier. So let's get into a couple of these quick hits here from HD, and we can circle back to the quarterbacks. Flair, do you want that to be a quick hit or a deep dive? We're going to treat it.
He said all HDs are all quick hits.
Would you trade Amon for Jane Reed and Debo? Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I think that's an elite level trade for elite level players.
Yeah, I think it's a fair trade too.
Would you trade Amon-Ra and James Conner for Zay Flowers and Kyron? I wouldn't do that. I like the first trade better. Full PPR 8-man league. My wide receivers are Amon-Ra, Nico, Drake, Addison, Mooney. My running backs are Achane, Connor.
Do the first one. You need volume in return.
Yeah, because you're dealing with that injury for Nico. I think you're going to be pretty much settled.
And then you're going to have to trade Drake London for a receiver or a running back as well.
Yeah, I think moving Drake London into a running back would be smart right now. But going into Jaden Reed and Debo for Amon-Ra, I think if you're looking, anybody in the chat, if you're looking at the value of Amon-Ra, he's going to be valued so much differently for different people across the board, because they're seeing a different dynamic in terms of his usage over the course of the last several games. But what needs to be said is that Detroit is a good offense. Detroit is an extremely efficient offense.
Mm-hmm.
And, while their pass rush will suffer with Aiden Hutchinson's injury, this is a good team. This is a good team that, given their opportunities, is going to continue to score. And it's important to understand that owning a player on a good team, like we said towards the top of the hour, owning players on good teams for this stretch right now in the middle of the season is really important. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why I'm okay moving into Amon-Ra, but I'm also okay moving out of Amon-Ra if I'm getting a guy like Jaden Reed and Debo. But a trade like this, Joe, to this end, while you're upgrading in the running back department, the movement to Zay, I think, is a little bit too much because, like we said when we were talking about Zay Flowers, right, is that Zay, if the running game starts to work up too much, then the passing game is kind of almost irrelevant because Derrick Henry is just amazing.
That is true, but you're also breaking the quick hitter rules, Bob.
No, that was an aside, Joe. That was an aside. That was in a general aside to the comment. You got one too. You got.
I did do one too. I'm trying to correct ourselves to keep true to the system because we got deep dives in the hole and we got to catch up with them because Ma asked this a hot minute ago.
All right.
So what will we make with your 12-team redraft? Hurts, Singletary, Hunt, Hill, Flowers, Ladd, Kelsey. Your bench being Ridley, Wicks, Juju, Bucky, Rashad, and Mostert.
First and foremost, get rid of Ridley. Ridley got 8 targets yesterday, 0 catches, and was complaining about not getting targeted enough earlier in the game. What kind of diva mentality do you need to have in order to say your quarterback threw for 95 or 85 yards?
Let me also say this here, Bob. I didn't watch that game, but I saw enough of the highlights to know that those targets are directional based, not necessarily accurate based.
I agree with you, but still,
I think what he's really trying to say is give me Mason Rudolph.
That's fair. Give him a quarterback that can actually get him the ball. That is an absolute fair assessment. But at the same point in time,
but you can't get anything for Ridley right now. I think
he's a drop. He's a drop.
What I would do looking at this team, trying to improve it, I want to upgrade your running backs. That's the need I'm identifying that I want to pick up. Because right now you're starting Bucky and Hunt. So as I look at this, your receivers, I'm loving Flowers, I'm loving Ladd, and Tyreek will give you a good juke. So I like that. In fact, actually, this week you're starting Juju with Flowers and Hill. So running back certainly where you need to move it at. You can't do it with Ladd yet because Ladd is going to give you too much value downfield. I don't want to move Mostert because I do think that he has the potential of giving you the upside. So if we're getting forced to make a move, it's probably going to have to be Wicks and White, maybe even Ridley and White. And that's probably the direction you have to move White. I mean, this is your last chance to get rid of White.
To get rid of who?
You have to do that.
To get rid of Rashad. Well, the problem is, is that Rashad and Ridley carry no value. And you said it very relevantly and very importantly here. Nobody wants him. He's very bad. And Chris, adding on to that, the waiver wire takes anything. The waiver wire takes anything. So, to that end, when we look at players right now that are on the waiver wire that look like...
I don't think Ridley's is worse. I think Rashad's is worse.
That look like decent enough ads for this week. Demario Douglas got a decent amount of volume basically in garbage-ish time with Drake May. They seem to have a decent connection. I know that Steve was talking about potentially starting Demario Douglas this past week. There are better you're probably Tyler Algier might be on your waiver wire right now. I would rather have Tyler Algier over Rashad.
I'd go get Tucker instead of Rashad. I think that's my first thing I want to do. But also, I'm not feeling this team's in a heavy need of makeover.
It's not in need of an overhaul. But
because if Juju hits the way we think he's going to, he's got 4 receivers.
No, and that's not the piece here. But I'm more so saying that looking at this back end of this bench, logistically speaking, Amon, your team becomes better by not making weekly decisions between Rashad and Ridley, because Rashad and Ridley, as long as they're on your roster, you are going to contemplate starting them. And I think, like we said
I'd keep
earlier,
Ridley until he's tradable. The 8 targets you can't replace on the waiver wire. They will replace the quarterback.
Demario Douglas had like 9. You can replace them on the waiver wire. I mean, not every waiver wire, Joe, is like our leagues, and that needs to be considered, right? You have guys coming out of the woodwork on a weekly basis.
I guess what I'm trying to say is Tennessee built their offense to be conducive to Ridley. With Hop kind of being in that zone, I don't want to get. I'm saying this. I don't want to trade for Ridley under any circumstance. I'd have him as a throw-in on a back end, but I also want to sit him. I have more confidence in Ridley moving forward than Wicks. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's fair, but
I don't think you need to do a whole lot to this team either.
To this point, though, you're looking there at Singletary staring at you in the face, and
yeah, but I like Mostert and I like Bucky. So
and Mostert and Bucky are going to probably hit your roster, if not sooner, later. But looking at the Juju's going to play, and you can decide on Hill or Juju or Ladd. But I think most importantly, Amon,
the Juju's is flex right now.
What this is important to know is that someone's going to drop somebody to pick somebody else up. And I absolutely agree with Chris on this end. And it was one of the points that we made about waivers a couple weeks back. And what people are noticing too is that, a couple weeks back, people were dropping Anthony Richardson because he was a piece that a lot of people were considering dropping. You saw Kyle Pitts being dropped, and I think Kyle Pitts deserved to be dropped at one point in time. Mark Andrews deserved to be dropped at one point in time, depending on what you needed. It is okay. It is okay to move on from players that aren't doing anything.
Yes, he did, Revit. I wasn't trying to diminish the fact that Ridley had drops. I was trying to just point the fact out that Levis wasn't good.
I get it. Levis isn't good, but Joe, when you have a player on your roster, I just want to make this a relevant point to you about why Ridley needs to be dropped. They do have Buffalo coming up, so maybe that turns around in Buffalo, and then they have Detroit. But he has only gotten over 10 points against the Jets.
I'm not trying to make the argument that Ridley is going to be a league winner. My entire argument is that Rachaad White you get 0 value for, so cut him and use first priority on Tucker. I still think Ridley has a chance to be a bye-week trade candidate.
He doesn't.
I think he will. By the time you get to week 12 and 14, when Levis is out, and there's 4 teams on the bye,
Joe,
which he has a couple of here.
It's gonna be week 11. Realistically, like week 9, week 11, and week 13, where maybe he becomes usable again. So you're telling me you want to keep him on your roster for 5 weeks?
What I first and foremost say is I don't think he has a need to have to move anyone. Starting point. I like this roster. And I don't want to rip the whole thing apart to do anything.
Thanks, Chris.
I just think that when it's all said and done, that, the value of what you're going to pick up on the waiver wire on the hot ticket of Douglas in New England, which we know will never score.
That's a lot.
The guy who's the number 1 on his team definitively, I'd rather do that.
I see where you're coming from. I do see where you're coming from. But at this point in time, I think that most of the fantasy community has been so burned by Ridley that what my primary point that I'm trying to make for Amon is that there are going to be many weeks where he's going to want to start Ridley, and starting Ridley, I think, is.
Oh, I don't think you're ever going to start Ridley over Hills, Ladd, Flowers, or Juju. I don't think that's a question anymore.
But matchup, looking at matchup wise,
you just got to know you're never starting. He's a stash. He's a stash and a hope. That's what he is.
Fair. That's a fair point. I just disagree with it, I guess. All right, let's hit a couple quick hits here before we get back into
Yeah, and then the only other two quick hitter or deep dives we see on the board, and if I'm missing one, please let us know, is Exxon and Joshua. We'll give you deep dives of both of ours. We are kind of going to be wrapping up today. I'm going to have to bounce at 5:30. I don't know when Bob does, but just let you guys know that up front.
So somehow traded Javonte Williams for Pollard before Sunday. Beautiful. Should I sell high on him even with Spears out? I have JT, Aaron Jones, Dobbins, Bigsby. I wouldn't.
Well, I don't know if you're not going to play them because you're not going to play them over that group. Go get something for them. I'm all for selling them when they're high.
Yeah,
he's higher with Spears out.
I want to see Aaron Jones's health, especially if I'm flexing guys, Joe. So if I have one or two flex spots for
four guys, I would start over Pollard right there. All four of them, I would start over Pollard.
I wouldn't start Bigsby over Pollard.
Oh, I would.
I wouldn't start Bigsby over Pollard.
That week 2, when they're doing week 2 in London, they always blow the second team out because they stay there all week and they actually get a climate.
But what you need to consider though about this, and we're getting a little bit off of it, but I think this is important for anybody who owns JT and Aaron Jones. These two running backs aren't healthy yet, so I'm okay holding on to Pollard until I know those two running backs are healthy. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I just think you're never going to have a higher point on moving Pollard, and you always trade people at the top of their value.
I agree with what you're saying, trading people on top at the top of your value, but Tony Pollard has returned value every single week this year, minus week 3.
Yeah. And this is going to be the peak of it because Spears is going to be out. Maybe you use the week Spears out and you traded someone who didn't realize Spears was out.
Because he plays Buffalo this week. There's a good chance that he'll be used pretty well. I mean, his volume outside the game where he only got 6 carries has been really good. And his target share, he's been getting a couple targets here and there.
And I also have to admit this. He's one of the guys we were wrong on the offseason. Not a ton of them, but we did have Spears ahead of him and didn't really pan out there.
Who would I trade Darnold for? I don't think you could get anything for Darnold right now.
You don't get anything for quarterback.
We talked about this earlier with the question about Burrow. You can't get anything for Darnold right now. So unfortunately, you kind of just have to. You kind of either have to eat the extra quarterback or drop him. And if your roster allows, save him. Like I had to drop Justin Fields this past week, 2 weeks ago, I believe. Somebody did pick him up. But I do have Jordan Love, and now I'm going to be searching for a bye week replacement when Green Bay comes around because I need a tight end.
So, Flair, as the quick hit answer for this, I want the side that has Mixon. That's what I want to be on when this is all said and done. It seems like you need 2 backs. I want to be on the side that's Mixon, even though it means I'm losing my boy Debo.
Yeah, I agree with that, Flair. I really like the side that's Mixon, Brian Thomas Jr., and Bigsby, and I'm not really concerned about the Ernest Johnson. I think that's a good trade. And to the end point that I was trying to make last week too, Joe, is those injury bugs come for James Conner sooner or later. It's like
they do.
Reaper, and that happened. So I'm really curious to see what his health is going to be. And he burned a lot of people this week. The
whole offense did because of
HD,
Murray.
For your questions that you had above 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex.
That doesn't change the answers, though.
It doesn't change the answer. I still go Jane Reed and Debo. It still doesn't change the answer. Chris, to that end, Amon is your floor play as well. That team of his needs upside. Reed and Debo for sure. Absolutely. Jesse, would I trade Bigsby for HN because the HN guy has ETN? I'd consider this. I love Bigsby's potential.
I'm only doing this if Bigsby's never approaching my starting lineup because I don't want to be in risk of having to play A-Chain before Tua's back.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, Jesse. If Bigsby is in my flex or is in my starting position right now, if Bigsby's in my flex right now, I'd go out and get A-Chan. But if Bigsby's my RB2 right now, I'd keep Bigsby.
Yeah.
That's how I would operate on that one. George, as a follow-up, so you guys know his roster, the Love owner only has London. He won't move him, DJ Moore, and Olave. And this goes back up to your question a little bit earlier.
George, I find you either change the trade or you find a new partner to dance with because you don't want to be bringing home DJ Moore.
Yeah, I think that's the answer that I'd give to. I do love Jordan Love a lot, but I really don't want to bring back DJ Moore. So that's kind of the piece there that's important to note. Jesse, would you trade Shaheed and Bigsby for maybe Hunt and maybe Hunt for Cooper or for Cooper Cup? I think I'm. It
If you
sounds
could
like
get the
Bigsby.
return of Shaheed and Bigsby for Cup, I would do it. A 3-1 trade is very hard to get through. But I mean, I'd try it. I mean, I'd offer it. I just wouldn't expect it to come home.
It sounds like Joe.
But I love how much trading you do, Jesse. It makes
It
me
sounds
happy
like
in
for
my heart.
Jesse, Bigsby's an expendable piece. So if he is an expendable piece on your roster, Jesse, I would move him for a guy like Achan. I wouldn't try to do any of this.
Well, I don't know. If I can do Shaheed and Bigsby for Cup, I would do that. If I can do those a 2-for-1, I just doubt you get it through. But apparently Jesse has voodoo powers, and I'm liking that.
See, told you, you're not starting Bigsby over Pollard. That is the piece that I think you need to get across, Joe, is that Pollard's getting so much volume on this team. And while the team is inconsistent and sucks, Pollard is definitely the best.
Just telling you, do not be surprised if Bigsby blows up. That's all I'm telling you. When they're week 2 in London, they're always too good at it.
That does happen. Dropping Darnold for Brian Thomas Jr. If Brian Thomas Jr. is still on the waiver wire somehow, Xenon, then yes, do that 1,000%. Dom, do I start Najee over Bucky and Chase next week? We can get into this more a little bit later on in the week. How do you fall on this, Joe?
So Chase Brown obviously has that elevated score because he got that last second touchdown, but he still did it. But you watched that game last night. Brown was getting the majority of the action against the defense that was getting to Burrow. And going into this week, the whole thing was Chase Brown's never out there on a passing down. He's never out there on a passing down.
We got you, Anthony.
Well, it didn't matter when Zach Moss was out there either, though. So we'll get you into the deeper answers as we get closer to the end of the week. But my gut feel is probably leaning Chase Brown right now.
Same. I was just going to say that's like my lean Monday right now is going to be Chase Brown.
But obviously, we'll dive into it as we get more of the injury report and all the rest of it. Because it could have turned out that Moss was just really hurt and they dressed him anyway. Because they do that.
I think that's the case with a couple of guys in the league this year where, you go into the week with an injury designation, then it comes off, and then it's like you start, but you don't really play a lot. Should I trade AJ Brown for Tyreek and Jonathan Taylor? PPR draft, really scared about JT's injury. Anthony, I'll treat this as a quick hit. I keep AJ Brown.
I'd go the other side. I'm rolling the dice on the injuries because Jonathan Taylor's in your lineup. You win, especially since you got. I look at this at peak value. When they're all healthy, you completely dominate. Theoretically, they'll both be healthy by the time the playoffs come around, in which you'll dominate. So I would take the side with JT and Tyreek.
So Anthony, what I'd want to know is what the rest of your team looks like. We can deep dive
your record. If you have 5 wins, that's a no-brainer for me.
If you have 1 win, you on the deep dive here.
Different discussion.
We'll get you on the deep dive. Bryce, is the Zach Moss run over? I'm not willing to say it's over yet. I want to see if that game was because of the Zach Moss injury. But Chase Brown definitely looks good, Joe.
And there also is the Chase Brown looks very good as a runner. They couldn't protect Burrow. Zach Moss is the receiving back. That part has become very clear, and they could not protect Burrow. So,
you saw in that game.
That game was stupid last night.
One of the defenders for the Giants was about to sack Joe Burrow, but didn't want to get a penalty. Yeah. And so he didn't sack him, and he just kept on let Joe Burrow go.
But they were all over Burrow the whole game. He was, even when they weren't, they looked like the Super Bowl front. I said that a couple of weeks ago. It kind of looks like they're going there. They might have rebuilt that. I want to see Thibodeau come back, but I think Giants team is not as pushovery as people thought they were going to be.
So I'm not already. I don't know. So Anthony's 2-4. So Anthony's 2-4 here. If you're 2-4, I don't think you can trade AJ Brown.
You can't. It sucks. Your record doesn't let you do that one. I would, like I said, you get 4 wins or more, you'll be doing that one, but you can't.
Yeah, if you were at 4 wins or more, I'd totally do that. But yeah, I can't do that right now with what you got. So Joshua here. For anybody in the chat, if you're leaving a question, if you want us to quick hit it with a couple word answer or a short response, we'll get you. If you want a deeper dive, which takes a couple minutes or so, just put DD in the chat. The Justin Jefferson owner is looking to trade basically everyone. And I like that. I'm eyeing his Jettis and maybe Hunter Henry. What trades should I make and initially offer?
Here's the
I have
roster.
Jaden Daniels, DJ Moore, BTJ, Jaden Reed, Pollard, Bijan, Pitts, Tracy. The bench is Shakir Achane, Caleb Williams, Corum Wixpool, and Nico and Rice are on the IR.
So
and
at the
Rice,
redraft league, what I would just be the initial offer. I would offer the 2 for 2 correction, and Brian Thomas Jr. for for Hunter and Jettis, and just see where it starts.
Who did you
You
say?
have name recognition in Pitts.
You cut us off. You cut us off. What did you say?
Oh, maybe Thomas Jr. and Pitts would be the starting point I would offer in a 2-2 same position trade.
Yeah, I don't think that will get it done.
It won't, but it's a starting conversation.
Josh,
and then I accept the upgrade from Brian Thomas to Reed.
Josh, my question for you before we deep dive this a little bit further, you're 3-3, by the way. Hey, Dan, we see you. You're welcome, Jesse. Before I deep dive this with you with Joe, what's the reason here for still rostering Rice? Because all of the, if it's a keeper league or a dynasty league, I do understand that. If not, they said that, I'm pretty sure they said that he's not coming back within this season.
Within the fantasy season, yes.
Yeah. So where I fall on this is that I'm trying to move your bench to make this the strongest starting lineup that I possibly can. And with what you have,
but it's also an IR spot, so it doesn't matter. He has no one else who could go on it.
That's true, but there might be a piece somewhere later down the line that you might want to pick up. Like, say for example, you went out right. Say for example, you went out and you wanted to pick up JT or something like that. That's the only reason I asked. But as it goes right here, I do agree with Joe that Pitts is a movable piece from your team. Mm-hmm. One of the other pieces that I would try to see what people are valuing it as. We were just talking about Tony Pollard as he is a starter for your team right now. I would see what Pollard's value is to that other person, because if he's trying to trade basically everyone away, he's trying to probably move into people that are going to just help him win, and he's going to want volume back, right? So where I would start with it would be
Caleb Williams.
I would be moving DJ Moore. I would offer DJ Moore and Pollard, and that would be kind of my starting place if I were to get back another running back. If I weren't able to get back,
do a 3 and 2. Do more. See, I would have started with. I guess I want to get rid of Moore anymore. So I would do Moore, Pollard, and Pitts to try to go get Henry, Jettis. That's how I would do that.
So Josh, what's the if you could tell us what are the running backs that this team has that you could possibly get back in return? Because you would have an elite core if you were able to keep BTJ and you could roll out Jettis, BTJ, and Reed on a week-to-week basis. That's a lot of upside for you.
Yeah,
and a lot of touchdown upside, especially when Nico comes back. There's a lot of touchdown upside. So
I think you could do it more in Pitts for
you
Jettis
could probably do DJ
Hunter.
Moore and Pitts if you couldn't do that with any Jettis owner. But if this guy is just fire selling everybody on the team and doesn't really care, and just wants volume back.
Yeah, and worst case scenario is he throws Wicks in to make it a 3 for 2.
You probably could offer DJ Moore, Pitts, and Wicks for those two guys. And I think that's where, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with you, Josh. If you leave his team in the chat, we can revisit this question after the next deep dive. Maybe even right now, depending on what you wrote there. Okay. He has Kamara, Etienne, Brian Robinson, Ford as his running back. So I want to give Pollard for sure. Yeah, I think if I could get, if you could go out, and I know Joe's not huge on Kamara, and there's a lot of reasons why, as a
He's in the
unit,
old running back category.
we're not big on him in general. But if I could roll DJ Moore, Pollard, Wicks, and Pitts into Jettis and Kamara or Hunter Henry, if he's fire sailing, it doesn't hurt to try, right?
No, that's right.
If he's on full, like, that trade wouldn't get done in a normal league. I just want to be clear. That trade would not get done in a normal league with anybody not fire sailing. But if this guy wants to fire sale both Kamara and Justin Jefferson, if you offer back DJ Moore, Pollard, Pitts, and Wicks, or something of that matter, you could probably get Kamara and Jefferson and Henry if you wanted to. You could even offer Tracy as well. I mean, it doesn't hurt to try, because it seems like this guy is just kind of going for just getting rid of everybody because he wants to change it up. Josh, you can definitely put some couple of ideas you're going to think about, and we can talk more about them, but that's how I would approach it. DJ Moore would be a piece I would move. Pollard would be a piece I would move. Wicks and even Tracy would be pieces I would move to get into Jefferson or Kamara if the guy is fire sailing. So let's get into a couple of quick hits here, Joe, before we
you got me for 10 more minutes, Bob, so just give me time it out accordingly.
Xenon, you're our next deep dive coming down the wire here.
It'll be the last deep dive, too. We don't got a whole lot of people requesting deep dives today.
Dan, you're on the deep dive here. Bryce, the Tampa Bay third string running back does look good. We talked about Tucker a little bit earlier in the episode. So definitely go back and watch what we were talking about Tucker. He's worth a pickup and potentially a start, which is kind of scary for us Bucky Irving owners. But Bucky still performed well, so I'm not really concerned about Bucky. Is Juju worth a flex play over Amari? Absolutely,
yes.
Dom. 1,000%. His usage is better with a better team, with a better quarterback. Enough said. Amari Cooper is closer to being dropped for me than closer to seeing my starting lineup. Let's hit a couple of these quick hits here. Would I rather have Juju or Dobbs? I'd rather have Juju. But I like, if I can get both, I'd go out and get both.
That's right.
And this is an aside, Jesse. So, like, if I'm carrying Rachaad White and Calvin Ridley and Juju and Dobbs are on my waiver wire, they're both
you
dropped.
Get both of those. That wasn't a fight.
They're both dropped. Like, if and Joe, to this end, right? If Ridley is on my team or anybody like that, and I can move into a Dobbs or a Juju on the waiver wire really easily, I'm doing it.
Well, that's true.
No questions asked. Do I trade Derrick Henry for Kupp and CD?
Yes. I believe in what those two receivers can be.
Yeah. I mean, business, for me, it really depends on what your roster looks like, but that's an elite level trade with elite level players. And I think that if I'm trading away Henry, again, he has 15 touchdown upside. What's he clipping at right now, Joe?
He's going to lead the league in touchdowns when it's all said and done. You know that.
He's already
probably going to be the number one running back.
He's already got 9 total with, the rest of the season left.
Yeah, dude, he's going to end at like 28. He's going to be great. King Henry is never going to stop. He's the Energizer battery. 3 touchdowns a day for the rest of his life.
I don't see why you'd need to do this trade unless you really needed a wide receiver.
Because you get 2 elite wide receivers, Bob.
I get it, but
I love Henry more than most. I started the Henry bandwagon bus back in May. I would still do this trade.
Yeah.
Mostly because I believe in what CeeDee Lamb's about to have thrown his way. I think CeeDee Lamb's about to give me 4 weeks.
You're getting 2 pieces for the long haul that could definitely be super elite. I think I'd do that. Quick hit. Should I stash Ricky Pearsall?
No.
George, I don't see a reason why. He has to prove it on the field first, and we have to see him consistently on the field. Is he still dealing with being shot?
Yeah.
I mean, his practice window just opened up. They have a bye week 9. I think if I were going to go out and get Ricky Pearsall, it would be after the week 9 bye or during the week 9 bye with Tampa, Seattle, and Green Bay coming up. I get it. Your wide receivers might be trash, but he's not worth it right now. I would go after Demario Douglas.
George, you only take him after he clears through his window and comes off the IR, because there are a lot of teams that this is the time of year you do it.
Welcome,
where
Jesse.
it's a 21-day window. So you open it up now. It goes basically until Halloween. Actually, it goes exactly until Halloween. And when you go there, what happens on the other side? You make a decision about whether he's allowed to play or not. But because he went through that window, he can practice with you for the rest of the season. So if this is what players do, teams do this with guys that they want to see develop, which obviously rookies clarify into that zone, but there's no guarantee they bring him back.
Right.
So they could bring him back. Juwan Jennings has taken his gig as number 3 and just say, hey, we're going to let you practice the rest of the year, because if we don't ever activate your window, you can never practice. So they could have made that decision. You're never going to play, but we just wanted you to be allowed to practice, and this is the legal formality within the CBA to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking at Parasol until I know he's actually hitting the active roster.
Yeah, I'm not.
Sorry, I just turned a quick hitter into a deep dive. Sorry, guys.
You're welcome, George. Yeah, I'm definitely not doing that. Xenon, who will be better in the long run with consistency, Swift or Brian Robinson?
Brian Robinson.
Your team is no PPR. Love Darnold. Running backs JT Kyron Swift, Tyron Tracy Cook, Jettis Amon.
Oh, this is his deep dive. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Cup and AJ, Kittle and Kelsey. What moves should I make here? So these are two deep dives together. Dan, we got you. Quincy, we got you for sure. We're going to touch on your deep dives in a moment.
So, Bob, my answer for this is Robinson for a couple of reasons.
Go for it.
First is I much strongly believe in the fact that Washington needs to score, and they're capable of scoring. Absolutely. Washington's defense is exponentially worse than Chicago's. That's just a fact. When we look at Washington's offense, though, even though we're seeing great passing numbers out of McDaniels, what we're not seeing a ton of is just sitting back and just gunning it the whole day and only doing it through passing like what the Cowboys are doing. We're seeing a much balanced attack. And shocker, their head coach used to be in the Cowboys and saw what it was like without it. So when I look at that and say, I'd much rather have Robinson. When I look at the situation in Chicago, I see a scenario where Swift, A, has always had injury risk to him, but B, could flat out disappear. I see the much stronger likelihood that Chicago starts not being able to score enough to keep Swift relevant than in Washington. So I see game script issues for Swift. I don't see for Robinson. And flat out, I believe when it's all said and done and we're sitting here in week 17, I think there's a chance that we're universally recognized on the field Robinson's the better player, because Robinson has been showing so much growth.
As I shared I think it was a couple days ago or last week about Brian Robinson Jr., is that Brian Robinson Jr. is one of those players that, last year, coming off of being hurt, right? You had 733 yards, 797 yards. He's already got to his touchdown total rushing this year as he got last year. He had that extra on the ground, through the air last year, which he's not getting enough of that this year because of Austin Eckler. And I think that that's the piece of it that kind of scares me away from Brian Robinson. It's not that I don't think that Brian Robinson is a good running back by any stretch of the imagination. I think he is a powerful running back that, when given opportunities, can throw you out elite level games like he did week 4 and week 2, where he went both over 100 yards. But how I view this trade is in terms of where the work is coming from. So I feel that as long as Austin Eckler is healthy, that Brian Robinson's opportunities in the pass game won't be as relevant or as good. And I do think that with the way that this offense runs through Jaden Daniels, he is going to have a decent amount of looks within the red zone. There's a really good potential that he has a good amount. I'm going to check that right now. That I think that's where his kind of prime where the prime Brian Robinson will be at for the season, right? He has 14 attempts inside the red zone, and we look at where Swift's attempts are in the red zone, and they're about the same, 14. So I'm sitting here going, where is the bonus action happening after these two running backs? And DeAndre Swift hasn't gotten any.
So, Bob, he just threw this trade potential up here: Swift and Tracy for Brian Robinson.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I think it's too much. I do think
that's too much, because I think I got to start this off. It's not like they're massively apart.
No,
so
they're not.
To give Swift an extra piece,
Hey, Marlon.
If it was straight up, I'd consider it.
Yeah, like for me, that is the piece that I want to consider, is that all of Brian Robinson's 5 touchdowns have come in the red zone. All 5 of them has come in the red zone. And let's just take a look at inside the 5. 3 of them have come from inside the 5. So to our point that we made earlier, is when we look at good offenses and we look at teams that are able to move the ball, both of these teams have been moving the ball really well in recent weeks. And Brian Robinson, despite Jane Daniels' potential to score a touchdown and steal a touchdown, the touchdown potential there for Brian Robinson is an elite level touchdown potential. We talked about this last week, where I said, if you feel that Brian Robinson can go out and get 12 touchdowns this year, buy him, because he's already at 5. There's a good chance that he could collect 6 more, maybe 7 more. If you think he has the chance to get over 12
this is the other one you put out here. I absolutely would do this one. Sell high on Swift and get Robin. I'm doing that. And that might be the best answer of all this. So, Xenon, I'm glad I can give you an answer on my walkout here today. Xenon, I was going to take care of you all, and have a great rest of your day, guys. Great Monday.
Xenon, I would definitely do this one. If I were to move Swift, I would move into Dobbins. I think that's a fair move. Dobbins looked really good this past week. He did get stuffed a decent amount, but the Denver defense is pretty aggressive. He wasn't a start for me this week, because unless we needed to start him this week because of the Denver defense being such a force. But I would definitely want to move into J.K. Dobbins. And I think it's fair enough that taking the amount of volume, especially with Gus Edwards down and Kamani Vidal being a rookie, I think that I would want to move. Looking at the matchups coming up, we have Arizona, New Orleans, Cleveland, Tennessee. Those are all susceptible matchups on the ground. I would rather move Swift into Dobbins. I would rather do that. Xenon, so looking at the roster, the Bijan manager doesn't want anyone but Jay Jettis. Is this something I take? Xenon, I don't know. I think that if I needed to move Jettis into Bijan, I don't see that as a necessity. If you can go and trade Swift right now and move Swift for Dobbins, I would sit tight on Jay Jettis. I do love the potential for Bijan Robinson, but I would sit tight on Jettis if that were the case. So see if you can move Swift for Dobbins. I would definitely do that. And like I said, if you like Brian Robinson and you think that he can go off for 12 total touchdowns or more, go for it. But I think I'd rather have Dobbins in this scenario. Xenon, I would rather have Dobbins in this scenario. Marlon, it sucks. Ayuk sucks. That performance, like I said, Ayuk was a start for me this past week. If you joined us last week, Ayuk was a start for both Joe and I. And I did say that he does have the potential to go off for one catch for 13 yards. I think he had 2 or 3 catches, so it was a little bit disappointing. But this is the road that Ayuk takes. Whenever you bench Ayuk, he goes off and plays really well. Whenever you don't bench him, he has a sucky game. But eventually, if you just keep him in your lineup, he's gonna perform decent enough. What happened to Saquon? Saquon was basically kind of scripted out of that game. If you watched the game at all, if you watched any of the highlights, Cleveland wasn't really in that game, despite what the score said at any one point in time. I don't think Philadelphia is in trouble at all. And Saquon just was running, just power running kind of thing. I don't see a problem with the Eagles at all. But it was disappointing because I own Saquon and I'm in a tight matchup, and I need James Cook not to play tonight in order to win, which I don't know if that's going to happen or not. You're welcome, George. Let's go up here to another deep dive before we get into business credit there. Dan, I want to hit you with the deep dive here. I got a potential trade. It would be the CD Lambs. I would be the CD Lamb side. CD and Pacheco and Jordan Mason for Stephon Diggs, David Montgomery. Running back depth is mostly stashes. You have Tank Bigsby, Kamani Vidal, and Javonte Williams. The other stars I have is Josh Jacobs. Maybe giving up Lamb too soon, but looking long-term, not sure I'll have a reliable running back 2 after week 10. So here's how I view this, Dan. Right now, with what they're saying about Pacheco is that Pacheco is, I'm just going to verify this so that I'm not, so 4 weeks ago, he was 6 to 8 weeks out, but we look at him as a runner. He just broke his leg. So the odds, I place Pacheco's return closer to 8 weeks, which would be around fantasy playoffs. And even then, I don't think that they would have to play them with Kareem Hunt doing well. So how I would view this trade is just basically this is CD. I know you're giving up Pacheco, but I'm just framing it in my mind as CD and Jordan Mason for Diggs and Montgomery. And I do think it's a little much. I do think it's a little much to give up on CD right now, like this. Dan, I'm just going through some of the numbers, and I know Dallas has looked oppressively abysmal on offense over the last several weeks, and Lamb has not been performing the way that we want him to yet. But let's kind of just look at these numbers, right? So he's outside of week 3, he's still performing in the vein of a wide receiver 1, borderline wide receiver 2 outside of week 4 with 23 points. Bye week coming up. After the bye week, you have San Francisco, Atlanta, Philly, Houston, Washington, all beatable through the air. These are teams that are beatable through the air. So maybe we're giving up on CD too soon. CD has the upwards potential of, say, 25, 30 points, but he hasn't reached that upwards potential in a lot of games yet. He still only has 2 touchdowns. Let's say his floor is 8 touchdowns. So, looking forward to the next couple of games, maybe he gets 6 more touchdowns in coming down the pipeline there. Mason, with the injury, carries a little less value for me right now. So Mason, with the potential injury and with the potential return of CMC, I'm not quite sure how I land on that. It says he's day-to-day. That was 3 days ago. Gets a couple of days extra rest. I don't see them rolling out Mason with the way Garendo performed against Kansas City. So realistically, Mason's coming back week 8. You're getting back a nice return. This is a really nice return, Dan, for that combination. How I fall on it, though, Dan, is I try not to include. Maybe I would try not to include Pacheco, but realistically, is there any other work that you could do to move? Which one of these 2 players do you want to move into more? That's kind of the long and short. It feels like you want to move into David Montgomery more. And I feel that maybe with the way your team is structured, I'm feeling like I remember it a little bit from a couple weeks back. If I were you, I wouldn't want to trade off a CD, but I would want to trade into David Montgomery. So if you can put in the chat, Dan, what are some of the other pieces that you have on your team? And is this guy only trading Montgomery to move into CD? I think that will be really important to understand. Yeah. So, Dan, my viewpoint here is that I am going out and getting Montgomery, but I'm trying to trade something else to do that. And if I am trading CD, I think I only trade CD if I'm getting like the Stephon Diggs plus David Montgomery. I don't feel like you need to add in the Jordan Mason or the Pacheco into it. I think that that's, they want to buy you low on CD right now, but with the talent that he has, I don't think that he's a buy low guy. I think that I think that he will come around in terms of volume perspective. Let's take a look at the volume that he got this past week. Coming out 10, 7, 7, 8, 9, 14 targets. So that's good. That volume's good. Whether, he's catching these passes, whether they're good volume passes, we have to go back and look at the game tape. But I'm still in on the CD bus here. And I know that I wouldn't sell him right now. If I were you, I'd see if maybe with the way, and this is dependent upon how you feel about this, Dan. With Godwin now having multiple wide receiver 1 weeks, week 1, week 2, and week 6. The targets are also there for CD. So 13 targets for Godwin, 6, 9, 9, 8, 8. CD's going to have his bye this upcoming week. Godwin plays Baltimore. You said that you're worried about your running backs coming out of week 10. Here's what I'd do. I would go see how Godwin performs this week. And if I wanted to, I think that it would be very fair with the way that Godwin has performed lately to move Godwin into Monty. And this is just coming from the perspective that, historically speaking, Godwin is likely to get over 1,000 yards. He's gotten that multiple times in his career. But his touchdown threshold, the most he's ever gotten is 9. He's already at 5. So maybe he has the chance to be the overall wide receiver 1 at the end of the season. And that's a fair assessment to make, because right now he's sitting as the overall wide receiver 1. In terms of touchdowns, in terms of he's 3rd in terms of yards, and he is 7th in terms of targets. So CD, though, is sitting at 3rd in terms of total targets, and is sitting at, let's see here, 10th in terms of total receptions. But when we look at the touchdown numbers here, he's all the way down around 26th. So, hey, MT, how's it going? So as I see it, Dan, one of the things that I would try to do is maybe after this game with Baltimore, moving, because the game should be good for Godwin, maybe moving Godwin into David Montgomery if you can wait a little bit and see if you can move that then. Because I don't know if you need to move it today. But if you did need to move it today, I still wouldn't do that. I do love Diggs. Don't get me wrong. Diggs is sitting there at 37 receptions on 48 targets. So he is right around 11th overall. And the touchdowns, again, with him, he's sitting at 3. So I think looking at the amount of targets that we're getting here, I'm still sticking with CD and seeing if I can move Godwin. And maybe you want to move Godwin and Mason into Diggs and Montgomery, or Godwin, Pacheco, Mason into Diggs and Montgomery, if you can make that happen. I don't know if that would get accepted, but it's definitely something that I would consider you look into. But maybe you don't need to do this right now unless you were planning on starting Mason this week. We'll see what Mason's health looks like as the week goes on. Let's go into here for some of these quick hits down here. Business. This is your 8-man PPR. Should I make the Henry for CD and Cup move with this roster? So I have Kyler, Mason, Henry, Marv, Debo, McBride, Connor, J-Mo. The bench is Downs, Douglas, Dak, Achane, Puka. Should I make the Henry? I think I would on this business. So we look at what you have here. You're moving Henry, you have Kyler, and you also have Connor. You're moving into Cup and CD. I think when I look at your roster, you're worried about Marvin Harrison, and that's fair. That's a fair thing to think about. With the concussion, with the lack of usage, it's definitely a problem to own Marvin Harrison right now. He's definitely a player that a lot of people still want to move into. They're buying a little bit of upside. You're selling Henry at a peak. Henry still is probably due for 15 plus touchdowns. I think I counted it up. We're already over 8 or so. So those touchdowns will come, maybe not in bunches and maybe not all at the same time. Mason with the injury, it's a bit of a concern. So looking at your team, if I had to trade Henry and I no longer was considering starting Marvin Harrison Jr., and I could start Debo and Henry and still roll with Kyler and a combination of Mason, Achane, Connor, I think I would do that. I think that that's something that would be fair to do business. And to this other end here, someone also offered me Garrett Wilson for Achane. Joe would tell you he doesn't want to buy Garrett Wilson right now. And, we're kind of, it depends on the trade for Achane. If I were doing this, I would rather move Achane and get into Garrett Wilson than I would rather move Henry at this moment in time. That's just a personal feeling business. And you can check back in with Joe tomorrow. Again, for anybody in the chat right now, we're going to be live tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. So I would like to do this trade more. Again, I want to caution this, though, with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is one of those players, high demand for target share. He did have 23 targets, in week 5 against the Minnesota team that does give up a lot of targets to wide receivers. Coming down the pipeline, he has a nice matchup: Buffalo, New England, decent against Houston, Arizona, and Indy. After that, maybe less so, but I'm buying into Garrett Wilson right now if I'm at the right price. I'm also trading Garrett Wilson for the right price. If I could keep CD and trade Achane to get into Garrett Wilson, I'd do that business. I would do this trade before I would do the other one. Recon, we got you. MT, I don't really deal with crypto. I'm not one of those crypto guys. My one friend did deal with crypto a while back and made 20 grand off of Bitcoin back like 6 or 7 years ago when it got hot all of a sudden. So that was really nice for him. I've heard really good things still on Ethereum. So if I were to go with a crypto, I would go with Ethereum. Kirk for Juju, yes. Recon, yes. I want Juju. I'm okay moving out of Christian Kirk. I want Juju on my team. It's Juju and Rashad. Please let me know. It can go through right now. If I could trade Kirk for Juju and Leggett, I would do that, Recon. So any trade where I'm getting Juju, I'm probably pushing yes, depending on the players I'm trading away. Just as an aside to this quick hit here, players that I would trade right now to get into Juju would probably be in the veins of like the Wickses, the Odunzes, the Michael Wilsons, even with the injury to the concussion to Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd even want him to get into Juju if I were to put a couple of pieces in there. Who do I like between Rashad, Leggett, and Singletary? All of these players are pretty much kind of bench to back end flex plays. Singletary might be losing his job. The better that Tracy performs, the more Singletary might not see as much as he saw prior to that. Yeah, I understand you can't get worthy with Juju. That would be nice. I don't want Rachaad White. This could be a buy low for Rachaad White, but Sean Tucker looked good coming out of that. So let's see here. Yeah, I like Tracy. I like Tracy a lot. There is something to be said about Xavier Leggett. They have a bye week, week 11. Not a great matchup, depending on if Patrick Surtain comes back week 8 for Denver. Great matchup this week against Washington, and another decent matchup week 9 against New Orleans. So I think that Leggett will be a spot start. And how I fall in this Recon is that if you need if you need 2 wide receivers, I'd do Juju and Leggett. But if you want a running back, I would err on the Singletary side. So if I could get Juju and Singletary for Kirk, I'm golden. And Juju for Leggett if I wanted 2 wide receivers. That's how I fall on that. I think that's a really good trade to come across. Quincy, you're our last deep dive of the day, and we'll answer any quick hits in the chat. And remember, we're coming on tomorrow. We'll be on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Quincy, I got Debo, Lamb, Cup, Tank Dell, and Mooney, and Juju. My tight end is McBride. Running backs are Kyron, Moss, Bigsby, Jefferson. What can I trade for Jefferson? So you want to move into Justin Jefferson right now. I can see why. I think that that's a really smart decision for your team as you prepare for the long haul of the draft or long haul of the season. If it were me, I would want to think about my running back room, but I get why you would want to move into Jefferson. I think a fair deal probably right now to move into J-Jeff. I wouldn't want to move out of Juju, but if you can move Debo and Mooney, and you might have to add in something on the back end, you could probably get that done, depending on if that person, what that person needs, Quincy. So if that person needs a running back, you might have to move out of Kyron, which would be kind of deadly for your team right now. But if he's okay gathering volume and is struggling with just the wide receiver position, I think you can realistically offer him Debo and Mooney and ask him if he wants another piece back. He'll probably counter by trying to move into Lamb, or he might counter with Debo and Juju. You can even start there, Quincy. I think that with the reason I'm suggesting Debo and not Lamb, Cup, or Dell is that Debo's value is, for me, it varies on a week-to-week basis. But what we said last week is that game for Debo was a nice watermark for the season, a nice high watermark. He is one of those players that rebounds. When he comes back from injury, he does pretty well. It took him a little while to get there, 3 or 4 weeks to get there. But the performance that we saw from Debo is going to be one of those performances that we start seeing from Debo, I think, more and more. So one of the things to keep in mind is that before that injury, he had 18 points in PPR. After the injury, he come back, injured, then 10, then 3, and then he's off for 20 points. He has 2 nice games, KC and Dallas coming up, then the bye. Then after that, Tampa, Seattle, Green Bay. So you might want to hold on to Debo, but he does carry a lot of value, and you could sell him because he has a lot of value to move into Justin Jefferson. But right now, I don't know if your team absolutely unequivocally needs Justin Jefferson. You could also start to think about moving Cup into Jefferson if you had the right capital. But I think I need to know a little bit more about the team a little bit more. We got you, Recon. Yeah, absolutely. So Quincy, let me go back up in this chat a little bit. See if I can find that team for you. I have to scroll a little bit here. Let me see. Scrolling up. So yeah, I think where I'd fall on that, Quincy, is that I don't necessarily think your team needs J-Jeff with the way that Debo bounced back pretty well, but I'm okay moving out of Debo in order to get into J-Jeff. So that's kind of how I fall on that. So where I would start, and this is something that we can touch on a little bit tomorrow as well, Quincy, is I'd start with Debo and Mooney. Like I said, you could put in another piece, but if I were to start with those two players, I think that you definitely get yourself worked up into that. Speaking of tonight, Revin needs Allen and Kincaid to combine for 14 points tonight. We were just talking about Allen this episode, and Allen is one of those players that could go off for 22. But the way the season has gone, it kind of really depends. So Quincy, I want to hear Joe's opinion about that. Drop that question in tomorrow's episode so that Joe can hit on that. But I think he'll agree that it is a good idea to move into Jefferson, but your team's pretty solid, and I would go search for a running back more than that. more than Justin Jefferson. So yeah, recon. I have Josh Allen, Saquon, Chase Brown, Hill, Flowers, Pickens, Laporta, Christian Kirk, Braylon Allen, Keon, Corum. All right. I'm actually liking Juju +1 for Kirk a lot right now. Jags are bound to implode eventually. I think you're already seeing the Jags implode, kind of realistically speaking. I mean, even Trevor Lawrence had a good enough day, but I mean, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to own any of the Jags right now, other than BTJ, I think, and Tank Bigsby. So I'm okay moving on from Kirk. Who would I take? So we have Saquon, Chase Brown. You have Tracy Corum. Brown, Hill, Flowers, Pickens. I think Hill, Flowers, Pickens. I think if you don't move on from Pickens, recon, like you were thinking about earlier, if you don't move on from Pickens, I think that it would be a decent enough smart move to have Juju and Singletary, knowing that you have Tracy as well. And the off chance they move back to Singletary. You tried all three of those. Okay, Quincy. Yeah. So it probably means recon will get. I'm going to finish off this before we get to that Quincy Xenon and MT. Recon. If I need, I'm looking at your team. Mostert, Tracy, Corum. I know you're stashing Corum for the long term. I get why you're doing that. Braylon Allen. You got a lot of running back fat on your roster. Yeah. I think I'd go for Singletary though, because he definitely gives you a decent enough floor if he's the guy versus Tracy. Just really depends. Legette's a back end flex right now for most teams, but how long will Andy Dalton keep it up, and then Bryce Young if he ever comes back? So I think it just depends on what you want. I would say Singletary for a floor play in a given week, but I think Mostert will probably get your starting lineup somewhere along the line. I would drop Wicks or Corum, to be honest with you. If I'm getting back Legette or Singletary, depending on which one I get back. If I'm getting back Legette, I drop Wicks. If I'm getting back Singletary, I probably drop Corum. That's my viewpoint on that. And it just depends on what you want. Legette is a play right now for some teams, and Singletary, if he comes back healthy, will they start him over Tracy? And now you have both of those backfields. And if that's something that now you have the whole Giants backfield, they're sitting at running back 38 and 39 here on the season. And he put up good numbers before he went down with the injury outside the Dallas game. I'd shoot for Singletary and drop Corum. Singletary, Worthy, Wicks in terms of the add to my team. Well, with Juju, I think Juju becomes an every week starter for you at some point in time. Probably right now, actually over Pickens for the short term. I think if I were to take any of those players, recon, I would go. I like Worthy, then Singletary, then Wicks. Like we saw in the chat, Wicks had a great preseason. Xenon, pointing that out. He also had a good end of the year. If he can get the drops in order, that would be nice. But you're welcome, Quincy. But that's kind of the thing, man. I would rank Worthy and then Singletary, then Wicks. If you can get Juju and Worthy, cool. If not, Singletary is definitely worth it because you're carrying Tracy already. But then you'd be in a battle of who to start each week. I think Tracy wins that job. I hear you out, Quincy, that he didn't accept it. Put it in the chat for tomorrow. We could probably get you a nice trade, going here. You might, and it really depends on what he needs. You might have to move Kyron out, but it seems to me that he doesn't want to move Jefferson. But realistically, if you wanted to move Lamb into Jefferson and do something crazy like that, you could probably start some conversations there. MT, another team is trying to tank in Dynasty for the 101. Do you think that's smart to do or bad? MT, my viewpoint on this is that I'm always ready to win now. if I'm tanking, and it has to be for an elite level talent. Coming out this year, you have potentially Aston Genty, who's the junior running back out of Boise. You have the wide receiver out in Arizona, who definitely has potential, and then you have a bunch of quarterbacks coming out this year. I just want to pull up a list of quarterbacks coming out in the draft, potentially coming out in this draft. You have Carson Beck, Quentin Ewers. Quentin Ewers is a dog. I love Texas. He's a dog. Shador Sanders, who doesn't really strike me as an NFL ready quarterback. He makes a lot of mistakes on the field. Yeah, I don't know. Cam Ward also. I think if you're going to tank and you need a quarterback, this is the year to do it. You're looking at Dylan Gabriel potentially coming out. You've got Jalen Milroe. I'm not too in on him. Carson Beck, Cam Ward, Quinn Ewers. Jackson Dart might be a nice dart throw. And then coming out in the running back room, you have Ashton Genty, who I just absolutely love. He could probably carry a team for the long term. Caleb Johnson from Iowa looks really good when they're playing. I have a current bet with Joe's brother about how many touchdowns Iowa is going to score on the season. It's not looking good for either of us. So yeah, NT, if I don't like the idea of tanking, but if I were to tank this year, that I'd have to have one of those quarterbacks or Ashton Genty for sure. So where I stand on that is I never want to tank, but if I am going to tank, it's got to be for an elite level talent. And this year has some really good quarterbacks coming out. I mean, maybe not as good as Jaden Daniels, but we'll see. Quinn Ewers might not come out. We'll see if that happens. And Cam Ward, again, looks really good as well. So where I fall, I never tank. Never tank. You play to win the game. I don't want any of the quarterbacks. I have Caleb Williams and Drake May for Superflex 12-team Dynasty. Absolutely. So if you are going to tank for anybody, it'd be Ashton Genty if he comes out. Watch his film, watch the YouTube videos that come out, and watch the TikTok videos that come out. The guy's next level. I mean, looking at his stats, just pulling it up. If anybody who's watching right now hasn't seen what this kid is doing, and this is with Caleb Johnson having a good season as well. He's got 1,248 yards, 17 touchdowns on 126 carries. Last year, he had almost that same amount of rushing yards on 220 carries. The dude's a dog. And I think that if I were to tank for anybody, it'd be him if he comes out. But that's the question. Is he going to come out? He's a junior. If he wins the Heisman, he probably comes out. Let's see here. Xenon. So Love and AJ for Lamar and Jamar. If that goes through, do I win? I do think that trade is even, Xenon. I think that trade's an absolutely even trade. Jamar Chase and AJ Brown, I'm going to use the word dog again, but they're absolute dogs. They're studs in the league. Jamar Chase has a crazy amount of, a crazy amount of targets. But he catches basically anything that comes his way. The time to buy Jamar was really after that Kansas City game, because Washington, Carolina, Baltimore all were susceptible. He runs up now against Cleveland, Philly, and Vegas, along with Baltimore again. I'm definitely on the bus to move into Jamar, and I'm definitely on the bus to, even though I love Jordan Love, and I think Jordan Love could end up as a top 3-4 passer on the season. Lamar Jackson is still Lamar Jackson. The game against Denver could be rough week 9, and Pittsburgh always plays them decently well week 11, but I am okay on doing that trade. I think it's a pretty lateral move in the wide receiver department, but I think it definitely gives you a little bit of upside in terms of the quarterback department that Love might not give you. Let's try to get Worthy off him, but you can settle for that. I'm going to end up having Flowers, Hill, Juju as my wide receivers. I think that's solid. I'll just drop Corn or just give this man Corum. Yeah, I think that's fair, Recon. I think that's fair. All right, everybody, all team players, thanks for joining us in the chat today. If you are Wanting to get more advice, come back tomorrow, 3:45. We usually go until about 6:30 tomorrow. And then we're also on Thursday and Wednesday. We'll talk some DFS lineups. We'll talk about some of our favorite waiver wire ads and drops. And we'll talk a little bit more about Cleveland, probably, because Cleveland's really not worth owning with that Jerome Ford injury, and Amari Cooper is closer to being dropped than starting in my roster. So all team players out there, thanks for joining us again. We'll be back tomorrow. Joe will be here. I will be here, 3:45. Peace out.